Hey, this is Pamela Schneider. I'm the retail editor for Blue Book Services, and this is the Produce Reporter Week in Review. Greg Johnson, our Director of Media Development and sometimes food service guy, kind of
occasionally.
We had a really fascinating report sent over by Acosta today that had some really interesting nuggets, and a couple of them are not surprising to me, at least, because they directly follow the trend in my household, at least, where we're seeing fewer people dine in right now and more people doing carry out and drive through. What were some of the other things that we saw in the report?
Those are the two that really make a lot of sense, because I think a lot of people are experiencing that. And even though dining rooms are open, we're not as comfortable dining in crowded indoor spaces with strangers, which is pretty reasonable. Some of the other stuff that was in there is really amazing, such as 28% saying they ordered from a food truck, and 23% ordered from a pop-up restaurant, and 19% ordered from a ghost kitchen. We talked about it a couple months ago. We don't think that there are 19% of the people who know what a ghost kitchen is.
Yeah, so that actually, that suggests that the number could even be higher, that that's only 19% of the people they surveyed knew they were ordering from a ghost kitchen. And that's the whole sneaky part of being a ghost kitchen itself. Yeah, those numbers really surprised me as far as ordering from food trucks and from pop-up restaurants. I think a lot of people don't even know what a pop-up restaurant is either. That's super trendy, and really interesting that people are shifting their their dining habits. Another one is that people are looking for an experience when they're dining out rather than just picking up food. I'm like, there's two different lanes here. I'll pick up from a ghost kitchen, and if I'm dining out, I want it to be Rainforest Cafe.
Yeah, we're going all in, but we still don't always like to cook at home.
Right.
And so, yeah, it seems like Americans are cutting out the middle, which is the average experience in a restaurant, as opposed to getting in and going home and having your own comfortable area and not having to tip.
Right.
And then, but having to do the dishes, or at least throw stuff away. Yeah, going out, people want the full experience, which is good in a way, because one of the segments that got hit hardest during the pandemic was fine dining, because that's not something that translated to carry out. People just would not spend that kind of money to take it home. Whereas eating in a nice restaurant and having that full experience, then it becomes a little more reasonable expense.
Some of the other trends that we saw from this study, I think restaurants should really be paying attention to as we try to navigate into how we're going to recover the restaurant category. And they also mentioned a Technomic stat that said that most of the recovery will be as early as 2024. And that does not sound early to me.
That doesn't sound very early. I don't know how many kids I'll have in college by then, but that seems like a ways away.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, over half of consumers are eating out because they don't want to cook, and totally relatable. But some of the new products that we've seen continue to see introduced into the marketplace are trying to help those home cooks in a slump. And even some of the meal kit companies are pivoting over to not necessarily a kit, but a good dining experience where you just pretty much heat and eat. A lot of retailers are picking up more of that business. I know my local retailer, HEB, has completely gutted a lot of the existing deli departments and existing adjacent space to the fresh produce department and put in the heat and eat meal solutions. And that was one of the stats that they saw in this Acosta study, was that consumers are also doing takeout from grocery stores. It said 75% of the shoppers say they have recently eaten carryout, dined at a restaurant, or eaten prepared foods from a grocery store. When ordering out, consumers are so they're ordering foods from grocery stores or eating prepared foods from grocery stores. So that is a segment I think both retail and food service really needs to pay attention to, is that take and bake, heat and eat, whatever you want to call it, grab and go. That category is going to continue to rise, especially as we get into the holidays and people get busy and they just don't want to cook anymore.
Yeah, all indications say we're going for more convenience, not less. Before we move on, I wanted to point out the problems we're seeing north of the border, because we do have a Canadian audience, and we did have a story earlier this week about how 80% of Canadian restaurants say that without government subsidies, they will soon be out of business because they are having a much different pandemic and lockdown situation than we are having in the United States. And that is a really bad situation there. And that stat comes from the Canadian restaurant group. We saw that stuff earlier in the summer from the US groups, and it was huge numbers, but it's not like that.
Yeah, it's not huge numbers, although I would say that since we're starting to see cross-border traffic opening back up, Canadian vaccination rates way higher than the US. I feel like their bounce back will be a little quicker, and hopefully no snapback like we had this summer with the Delta variant. One would hope that they would, but it doesn't surprise me that, a whole sector that has been virtually closed down for a year and a half is going to need some bailouts. Recall how many billions of dollars went into the restaurant industry during the height of our closures. So if Canadian restaurants haven't gotten that kind of assistance yet, they're definitely due.
But companies that shut down don't just flip a switch and open back up.
Right? No, they don't.
Those employees, they're gone, and those supply chains are permanently disrupted.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long road ahead, but hopefully not too rocky road. We just got the notification for CPMA. It's going to be happening in April in Montreal, and I'm like, sign me up. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get back on the road here. Unfortunately,
that is only 6 months away, so that's not 2024.
No, not 2024. Wow, that's a bummer numbers, Technomic. Jeez. But the numbers that are not bummers. Anna Marie put together her report for the Produce Marketing Association this week for September's retail produce sales. And we're seeing really high dollar growth, but not quite as high of volume growth, which indicates a little bit of inflation continuing in the produce department. And from what I'm seeing with growers shippers talking on LinkedIn is that we're probably in for a difficult winter and spring as far as inflation goes. But the numbers as far as retail produce sales, I thought was really interesting when you look at it compared to 2020. When we restarted over in March, we saw a huge drop in year over year, but we're almost back to that same line that we were seeing in year over year retail sales. I'll throw it up here so everyone can see what I'm talking about. And I thought that was fascinating to see that we are actually getting close to comparable numbers when we're talking about 2021 compared to 2020, instead of having to bring that 2019 in there to not shock you. Because when we had the first lapping year, the 2020 to 2019 numbers, 2020 to 2021 numbers, I think were a gut check for some people who have to follow their, trying to keep up with their numbers, and it just wasn't there. Where we saw in the beginning of the pandemic, where vegetables were way ahead, we're actually seeing fruit way ahead, and it could be inflation in fruit. It's just really interesting to look at these numbers, and this report continues to just provide so much to chew on that we can't even cover it in 10 or 20 or even 30 minutes. So I encourage you to go to producefieldbook.com and check it out.
It seems like we've had the problems comparing pre-pandemic, middle of pandemic, now we're not post-pandemic, but all these external influences are so huge. And then it feels like we're starting to get beyond that. But now we have this new external force, which is inflation, which just because sales are up, it doesn't mean people are buying more. Everyone's paying more for everything. And that is not a good thing.
No, sales, this whole sales are up equals good is not, no, that's not it, because it's not meaning more dollars back to the supply chain and back to farmers. It's just meaning things are costing more because everything is costing more right now. So these are numbers we're going to have to continue to watch, because it, when we went through the original part of the pandemic, these numbers were amazing. It's kind of like keeping score. How high are oranges this month? Remember those days? And now we're looking at it more like a sense of dread, where it's like, oh no, you know, we can see some good things in here. Of course, we see some great sales figures, but we also see some troubling things, and are going to have to continue to watch it.
Yes, the next step will be to see if the rising prices changes people's buying habits, like we saw during the Great Recession of 08 and 09, because it did.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also a time of higher unemployment, and that's not a problem now.
Right, that's not a problem. And you know what? Joe Watson had a really great comment about this report, where he was talking about people increasingly dining out, or seeing how much it's costing to dine out, and it's making them look more toward saving money by cooking at home. So we may see those cooking at home numbers continue to be strong. So it could be good for retail, not so great for food service. But I still think that there's going to be, I mean, quite a swath of people who will turn to food service to solve this what's for dinner, what's for lunch conundrum. Even like leaving the house and going to get lunch and coming back to the house when you're working from home makes it a whole new day. So, all right, well, that's it for the Produce Reporter Weekend Review. If you are not getting the Produce Reporter newsletter, you need to go to producebluebook.com and sign up.
See you next time, Hurricane Pamela.
I know, right? It sounds like Hurricane Pamela out here. We got 5 inches of rain last night in like 3 hours. And it sounds like Hurricane Pamela out there because they are cutting my neighbor's tree, and they pulled up right as we were starting.
You can't.